Welcome to Deep Dive, a sort of personal project that I felt I had to share. I have more than 30 books in queue and probably another 30 topics that I want to learn more about. And sometimes I want to hear a summary before I invest a couple of days of deep dive. This podcast is a result of that need. With the help of some Google apps and tools, what you have here is a podcast format that is surprisingly entertaining, even if it's a bit comprehensive. For this episode, we dive into the Golden Dawn. Sources are The Complete Golden Dawn System of Magic by Israel Regardie, and The Golden Dawn, the original account of the teachings, Rites, Ceremonies of the Hermetic Order by Israel Regardie.
Welcome to the deep dive. So imagine this, a single key, right? And it supposedly unlocks this huge tradition of Western magic. That's the surprising claim we're diving into today. The idea that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, this late 19th century group, was basically the main source, the sole depository of magical knowledge back then in the West.
That's a big claim.
It is. And that its influence just spread out into loads of other occult organizations. It sounds pretty bold, so let's see what's really behind it.
It is a significant assertion, definitely. And for this exploration, we're relying heavily on Israel Regardie's work.
Right, the big books.
Exactly. The Complete Golden Dawn System of Magic, and also the Golden Dawn, the original account.
Yeah.
You know, the one detailing the teachings and rites.
Okay.
These are, well, they're incredibly detailed. So our goal, really, for you listening, is to kind of pull out the essential pieces.
Like building a block.
Yeah, the foundational teachings, the rituals, what they were aiming for. So you get a solid handle on it without, grounding in all the information.
Exactly. Think of it as your guided tour through the really core stuff of this order. Because, wow, these sources cover a lot.
They really do.
We're talking tarot symbolism, astrology stuff, these techniques for, well, what they called spiritual travel.
Astral projection, yeah.
Making sigils, and that really complex Enochian magic system. So, okay, where did it all actually start? How did it come together?
Well, the origin story, it has this sort of enigmatic feel, doesn't it? It often starts with Robert Wentworth Little.
Okay.
He's the one said to have found these old ritual texts, rescued them, supposedly, from a Masonic storeroom.
Right, the storeroom story.
And these documents are generally seen as, the foundation, the thing they built and expanded upon for the early rituals.
Gotcha. But then Little passes away and the story shifts a bit, doesn't it?
It does. Dr. William R. Woodman comes into the picture. And then pretty soon after, the two other really key figures, Dr. Westcott and MacGregor Mathers.
And this is where the cipher manuscripts come in. That whole intriguing part.
Exactly. Westcott supposedly finds these mysterious coded writings.
And the story of where he found them is a bit fuzzy.
Very fuzzy. You hear different things, maybe in his library, maybe connected to the Rosicrucian Society he was in, the SRIA.
Or a bookstall find. I've heard that one too.
Yeah, or maybe inherited from Frederick Hockley, another mystic. Regardie mentions these possibilities,
Does he lean one way, or does the mystery kind of add to it all?
That's a good question. He lays out the options, but doesn't really land hard on one. And you're right, this air of mystery around the origins.
Yeah.
The almost legendary discovery. It definitely adds to the Golden Dawn's aura, maybe even its perceived authority,
Makes sense.
But whatever the exact story, these cipher manuscripts were the starting point. Westcott got Mathers involved to decode them.
And they supposedly had an address.
That's the story. An address for a Fräulein Anna Sprengel, supposedly a Rosicrucian adept over in Germany, which led to letters being exchanged and eventually the go-ahead for Woodman, Westcott, and Mathers to set up their own group in England, a sort of semi-public occult organization.
And it sounds like they had a pretty ambitious plan for this group.
Oh, definitely. The idea was to create something that used, really elaborate, structured, magical ceremonies.
Okay.
And integrate deep Kabbalistic teachings and provide a whole system for spiritual training.
And it was open to women too, right? Which was unusual.
Very significant, yes. Open to both men and women on an equal footing. Quite progressive for that time period.
But we should probably note that initial group, that unity, it didn't exactly last forever, did it?
No, sadly not. The sources detail how the original order eventually fragmented, broke up into different independent groups.
Right.
So importantly, each of these offshoots generally kept working within that same ceremonial framework the Golden Dawn had set up.
Even if they maybe tweaked things.
Yeah, sometimes developing their own interpretations or focusing on specific aspects, like one group emphasizing Christian mysticism more.
Okay, so despite the splits later on, what was the core mission? The fundamental philosophy of the original Golden Dawn?
The absolute central aim, and Regardie really hammers this home, was initiation.
Initiation, not just joining a club then.
Not at all. It was meant as a really deep, personal, transformative process. The ultimate goal was helping the individual go beyond their normal limits, to become more than human, as they sometimes put it, or in their specific terminology, to achieve the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel.
Ah, okay. Which sounds like their way of talking about illumination, enlightenment.
Exactly that. It's framed as the ultimate spiritual achievement, like enlightenment, but described through this, well, magical framework.
And the initiation process itself was key to that.
Absolutely. It was seen as this transformative journey, kind of like alchemy, purifying base stuff into something precious.
Right.
The whole system, philosophically, was designed to help the candidate find that unity of being, which is the inner self, the pure essence of mind.
So the big takeaway for you listening is initiation wasn't just a ceremony.
No, it was seen as a crucial step towards really deep self-discovery and spiritual realization within their system.
And to make that happen, ritual and ceremony were completely essential tools, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely fundamental. The neophyte ritual, that's the first initiation level, is especially important.
Why that one particularly?
Regardie points out that it contains the basic formulas for all the practical magic that comes later. It's like the engine, he says, for bringing the candidate towards the light.
He also mentioned something about the glamour of the rituals. What's meant by that? Not just flashy costumes, presumably?
No, not just visual appeal. By glamour, he means the total effect. It's the combination of the ritual's actual content, the words, the symbols, plus the impact of the movements, the choreographed actions, the powerful speeches being delivered. It was meant to be this whole experience.
Engaging, everything.
Yes, engaging the intellect, but also the emotions, the senses, creating this potent atmosphere that was, helpful for interchange.
And inside that neophyte ritual, there's something called mystical circumambulation.
Yes, a symbolic walking around the ritual space. You can think of it as physically acting out the movement from, say, darkness or ignorance towards illumination, a symbol of fading light giving way to greater light.
Makes sense. And they used powerful symbols like pentagrams and hexagrams a lot.
Extensively.
And here's a really interesting detail I picked up. Apparently, members often actually drew these figures right there in the temple space rather than just having them memorized.
That is fascinating, isn't it?
What does that suggest?
Well, it points towards a very active, very engaged kind of participation, I think.
Yeah.
Emphasizing the direct creation and experience of the symbol, not just, reciting something learned by rote. And the hexagram specifically was held in very high regard. It was seen as this really potent symbol.
Representing what exactly?
It represented the interplay of the 7 planets, but governed by the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life.
Okay.
And all unified by that 7-lettered divine name, Ararita.
Arita.
Yeah. It was also called the signet star, or the symbol of the macrocosm, representing the whole big universe.
So for you listening, the point is these symbols weren't just pictures on a wall.
None at all. They were active tools used within the rituals to try and connect with these deeper cosmic forces.
And they had specific ways they had to be used in the rituals, didn't they? Like rules.
Yes. Completing the circle when drawing or tracing them was crucial in both hexagram and pentagram workings. It signified like a contained and complete magical operation.
Right, sealing it off.
Exactly. And beyond that, the Golden Dawn system laid out these really intricate sympathetic relationships between the planet's superior and inferior planets.
Based on how they fit in the hexagram.
Precisely, based on their specific positions and correspondences within the hexagram symbol. And understanding this guided how they would invoke or use planetary energies in their magic.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and dig into some of the really core concepts and practices. The Tree of Life seems to pop up everywhere. It feels central.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
The Tree of Life is presented as this fundamental symbolic map. Regardie calls it the key of all things.
Wow.
It's this, complex but also elegant diagram. You've got the 10 Sephiroth.
The spheres.
Yeah. Each sphere representing different aspects of the divine. They have their Hebrew names, specific divine names attached, assigned angels, archangels.
Okay.
And these spheres are connected by 22 paths. Each path links to a specific Hebrew letter and also a tarot trump card.
So it connects everything.
It really aims to. So for you, the key idea is the tree of life wasn't just a static chart. It was seen as a living blueprint of the cosmos and also the human soul.
A map for understanding yourself and the universe?
Exactly. A framework for understanding your place in things and a map for your spiritual journey within the Golden Bond system.
And these parts, the Sephiroth and paths, they weren't just sitting there, were they? They formed patterns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The way they're arranged creates these dynamic symbolic images, like the Serpent of Wisdom,
Okay.
which traces a specific kind of winding energy path up the tree. And then there's the Flaming Sword, representing the flash of divine energy coming down into creation.
And the pillars, I see those mentioned a lot too.
Yes, the two pillars. You hear various names for them. Pillars of Hermes, Seth, Solomon, sometimes Shu.
What did they represent?
They symbolize that fundamental idea of duality. Opposing forces, but complementary.
But light and dark.
Exactly. Balance, and that constant interplay between light and darkness. Visually, they were described with these black cube bases,
Symbolizing.
grounding in matter, maybe the realm of darkness or potential.
Yeah.
And then topped with flaming red triangular capitals,
Representing spirit.
representing the threefold nature of spirit, and the dynamic energy of life, fire, and activity.
Okay. We also see mentions of specific practices like the Kabbalistic cross. What was that about?
Yes, the Kabbalistic cross, with the Hebrew words Ate, Malkuth, Vigebra, Vegedula, Leolam, Amen. That was a really foundational practice.
Foundational how?
Think of it as a way to center yourself, to establish a connection between sort of the earthly you, Malkuth, and the divine above, Ate, representing Kether. It grounds you, but also draws down spiritual energy.
Right. Centering and connecting.
Precisely. And balancing the forces of severity, Gebra, and mercy, Gejula.
Okay. And then there's this technique called the vibration of names. That sounds intense. How did it work?
It was a specific technique, yeah. Used to basically charge yourself and the space around you with spiritual energy.
Yeah.
It involved really focusing your awareness in your heart center, that's Tiphrith, on the tree of life.
Okay.
Then visualizing the Hebrew letters of a specific divine name, like glowing with bright white light. And then you'd slowly, deliberately pronounce the letters.
Out loud.
Yes. Feeling the sound vibrate deep inside your body, and then imagining that vibration expanding outwards, filling the whole space.
Powerful imagery. Sigil making was also part of their toolkit, I gather.
It was. The symbol of the rose is mentioned as one specific method they used for forming sigils.
And a sigil is basically...
It's a kind of magical symbol, right? Carefully designed and constructed to represent a specific intention or desire. It acts as a focus point for your will.
Gotcha. And then we get to spirit vision or astral travel. It sounds like a whole other level.
It's definitely presented as more advanced practice. Traveling in the spirit vision, or astral projection, as it's often called now.
How did they approach it? What were the steps?
Well, the initial stage often involves something called scrying, usually using tatwas.
Tatwas.
These are simple geometric symbols representing the 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, spirit.
Okay.
So you'd focus intently on one of these symbols until it became super vivid in your mind's eye, almost like it was physically there.
And then?
The next step was to mentally or astrally enlarge that symbol, make it like a doorway, and then consciously pass through it into a corresponding inner landscape, an astral realm associated with that specific element or symbol.
Wow. How did they know if it was real or just imagination?
That's a crucial point. They emphasized testing the reality of these visions. One method was to try and mentally trace other symbols you'd previously worked with within that astral landscape. If the vision reacted correctly, it added to its perceived validity.
Interesting. Like a reality check.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
To distinguish it from just daydreaming.
The sources also talk about the middle pillar exercise. What was the purpose of that one?
The middle pillar. That was a very important technique. Its aim was to consciously visualize and establish a balanced flow of divine light.
Down the middle of your body.
Exactly, through the central Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, as they correspond to points within your own energy field, your aura.
Why do that?
It was considered a really powerful preparation for meditation, for other magical work. It helped to purify your energy field, strengthen your connection to higher spiritual forces, and create inner balance.
Now, with all this focus on, powerful techniques and spiritual ascent, did they acknowledge any dangers, any potential downsides?
Oh, absolutely. The sources are actually quite explicit about warning against a major pitfall.
Which is?
The development of enormous egotism.
Spiritual pride.
Exactly. The texts point out that as students learn more, gain insights, maybe feel they have more power, they can become incredibly susceptible to ego inflation.
And maybe not even realize it.
Often without realizing it's happening, yes. Which really highlights how important humility and constant self-awareness were considered to be on this path as the Golden Dawn saw it.
Right. Now, the Golden Dawn didn't just invent everything from scratch, did it? How did it connect with other existing esoteric systems?
No, it was definitely quite eclectic. It drew on and integrated a whole range of Western esoteric traditions.
Like the tarot?
Tarot was absolutely central. They had really detailed teachings on interpretation, things like looking at anagrams of card titles for hidden meanings.
Really?
Yeah, methods for choosing a significator card to represent the person asking the question. Deep dives into the symbolism of every single card. And specific ways of reading key cards, like temperance.
Okay. What about astrology?
Astrology was originally taught, part of the curriculum. Apparently, it was later dropped as a mandatory subject for the outer order.
But still important.
Yes, because it was still expected that the more advanced members, the adepti minors in the inner order, would need a solid working knowledge of astrological principles.
For what purpose?
Especially for doing planetary and zodiacal invocations correctly. You needed to understand the correspondences.
Makes sense. And geomancy, I saw that mentioned.
Yes, geomancy, that ancient method of divination using patterns made by, like, throwing earth or dots on paper, that was also integrated into their system as a divinatory tool.
Okay. And then there's the big one, Enochian magic. That always sounds so complex and mysterious.
It is definitely presented as a very advanced, very intricate part of the Golden Dawn's higher teachings.
Involving its own language.
Yes, a unique, structured language, the Enochian language, plus a whole complex system of magic associated with it. It was described as a perfect language, supposedly never spoken by ordinary humans before Dee and Kelly.
Wow.
Its structure, being quite synthetic, allowed them to weave it together really intricately with other parts of the Order's work.
Like tarot and geomancy again.
Exactly. It represented a very sophisticated, high level of magical practice within their system.
It's hard to really grasp what it felt like. Could you maybe give us just a little flavor of the initiation rituals themselves, like for the different grades?
Sure. Just brief snippets, obviously. But the ceremonies for moving up through the grades, Zealoter, Practicus, Theoricus, Philosophus, and so on, they each involve certain common elements.
Like?
Well, there were always solemn pledges of secrecy the candidate had to take.
Okay.
Then, specific symbolic objects, tools relevant to that particular grade, would be presented and their meaning explained.
Learning the symbolism.
Exactly. There were also specific ritual movements, steps, and hand signs to learn and perform. Grand-sounding, evocative words or phrases to memorize.
Passwords.
Yes, secret passwords for entry. And the bestowal of a new mystic title for the candidate to use within the order.
And that idea of moving from darkness to light.
That was a really powerful recurring theme, often symbolized very dramatically by removing a hoodwink from the candidate's eyes at a specific climactic moment in the ritual.
A literal unveiling.
A very literal unveiling, yeah. And the rituals used powerful archetypal settings symbolically, sometimes representing the Garden of Eden, other times the Holy of Holies from the temple.
Trying to create a really deep impact.
Exactly, aiming for a profoundly moving and transformative experience for the person going through it.
It really does paint a picture of something incredibly immersive and layered. So, okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things you think people should take away about the Golden Dawn?
Well, I think in essence, you have to see it as this really ambitious attempt, right, to create a complete, comprehensive system of Western magic.
Not just spells, but a whole path.
Exactly. A vehicle for personal spiritual evolution and initiation. And it placed this huge emphasis on ritual and symbolism as the primary tools for transformation.
And it pulled together so many different threads.
It really did, encompassing this remarkably broad range of esoteric practices, deeply rooted in Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, geomancy, and culminating in their unique take on the Enochian system.
It's clear, I think, that what we've managed to cover here is really just scratching the surface, the foundational layer, but hopefully it gives you a solid grasp of this hugely influential order.
Hopefully.
So maybe a final thought for you to chew on, considering just how much impact the Golden Dawn had and how its ideas spread. How might its core principles, its practices still be relevant today? Where might you see echoes of them in, modern spiritual or esoteric movements?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah, what parts of their system seem particularly interesting or maybe worth exploring further for yourself?
It really is such a rich area We definitely encourage you, if this has sparked your interest, to maybe look deeper into Regardie's works or explore some of those specific practices that caught your attention today.